Welcome, everybody, to the Success Elevated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Hayden Lee, and I'm joined this week by a very special guest, a friend of our team here at Spot On Solutions, one of our great affiliate partners, Josh Ehmke, founding partner of One Claim Solution. Josh, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks, Hayden. Glad to be here.
This is really fun for me because, working for a company like Spot On Solutions, it's small enough that it feels like a family. I can go and sit down and have a conversation with our CEO or CFO at any point, right? I can go sit down and talk with my bosses, Derek and Katie, but it's also big enough that we get the opportunity to meet lots of really cool people. And depending on what my day-to-day looks like, I don't necessarily get to meet all of these cool, awesome people. So this is going to be a fun podcast for me because I get to pick your brain a little bit, Josh, and get to know you and what you guys are doing over at One Claim Solution. And I'm really excited to have you on. So
no, like I said, I'm glad to be here. Spot On's been phenomenal to work with. We've had a really good time so far, and we're excited to keep that moving forward. You guys have been great.
Love it. Okay. Well, I want to kind of just dive right in. First things first, Josh, and have you talk a little bit about who you are and your career up until the point of deciding to start One Claim Solution. And then obviously we'll kind of dive into what One Claim Solution is and all of the cool things that you guys are working on over there. But, I've heard that you might've been a lawyer and might still be a lawyer at some point, to some extent, right? Like I think there's all sorts of cool stuff we can talk about there, but yeah, talk a little bit about who you are, Josh, and your background up until this point of your career.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Let's see, I started at the beginning, Arizona born and raised.
Love it.
This is where home is. And before law school, I actually worked for two of Arizona's top three real estate developers. And that was kind of my life before law school, working with different municipalities, creating relationships, kind of overseeing the entitlement process of these large scale commercial real estate projects. So fascinating, loved it. In fact, outside of law school, I got back involved a little bit, served on the different planning and zoning commission, in the town that I live in Arizona, kind of being part of that. It'll always be my first true love, I guess you can call it, from a career standpoint. Awesome. But when things kind of dipped in the early 2000s in the real estate market throughout the country, I'd always wanted to go to law school, and that was the perfect opportunity to do it. And so I stepped away from real estate development, went to law school, had a couple kids when I started, and it's a 3-year program. I finished it in about 2.5 years and had a job outside of school. So it was kind of a roller coaster frenzy, but it was fantastic. Outside of law school, I went to work for a nonprofit doing domestic violence family law. The nonprofit really focused on keeping killers from profiting financially from the murder in a domestic violence situation. That was just really heavy for me. And so I started up the family law division of that nonprofit to help the victims get out of that situation before they became one of our death cases, murder cases. So again, still very heavy. And right out of there, I went to work for an air ambulance billing company. We focused on fixed wing air ambulance flights from across the world, huge dollar amount flights. We were working with medical insurance industries and insurance companies to get those paid. Really opened up my eyes to a new way to practice law, and had a buddy that needed some help in this industry, in the restoration world, and said, "Hey, Josh, I know you're kind of working with insurance companies, not in this industry, but in the health world. Can you help me with a couple files and see what you can do?" And so I said, "Yeah, you bet." So I jumped in and immediately got great results from my very few efforts. And so it kind of made me step back and look around and say, okay, what's going on in this industry? The more I looked into it, there was very, very few, if any, attorneys that were really, doing anything in the industry. And kind of made me wonder why not? What's going on here? And so clearly there's a problem here, but what's the solution, right? How come nobody else is doing this? And it was a difficult solution to solve because, you're dealing a lot of times with small balances that these restoration contractors have. And so for them, it wasn't really worth it to go and spend $3,000 to $5,000 on a retainer with an attorney to go and collect $3,000 to $5,000.
Right.
A lot of times they would just walk away and just be like, "Oh, fine, we'll just take it in the shorts and move on to the next one." So the solution was, how do you make that work? Smaller balances, right? And so the concept kind of evolved into creating, a billing agency of sorts, and it's a hybrid, right? It's a billing agency / law firm hybrid, where the attorney's fees are just built in to the other services that the billing agency is doing. And so,
Gotcha.
free attorney is much more affordable that way than having to pay the $3,000 to $5,000.
100%. 100%. Yep.
And so, part of that drives insurance companies a little crazy because, they're really good at out attorney feeing their opposition.
Right.
And that just doesn't come into play here. So we're able to provide those services to our contractors. They love having an attorney that they can call up at any moment and say, "Josh, I'm crazy seeing I just got kicked off of a job. What do I do?" Like, it was an adjustment this morning. I had one where an adjuster got one of our contractors who was trying to get, it was a newer contract that we just recently signed up. And, Hayden, you and I talked briefly at the beginning about the importance of relationships. And that's something the OCS, One Claim Solution, is huge on, is building those types of relationships. And that was one where we actually had a relationship with the adjuster. And so we were able to get all of that resolved really quickly, and everything was fine for that contractor. And so it was just that adjuster didn't know we were working with that contractor yet. And so he kind of backed up and, changed his position there. So, there's so many different challenges and issues, as facing restoration companies today, whether it's, their referral sources and how they get their leads, to getting kicked off of jobs because of these contractors that are on, other TPA type programs, or even on program work. There's just so many challenges out there. And that's something that we kind of take pride in, is being able to help those contractors through a lot of these issues. We can't solve all of them, but as you know, relationships are a big deal. So if we're hostile today towards one of our, towards an adjuster for one of our contractors, if I come in contact with that adjuster again tomorrow for a different contractor, and he's still sour about how I treated him today, that doesn't work out so well.
Totally. Like that, something as simple as that, can hurt you in a bad way. Well, and the same thought process, which is the idea that I think, it's great for restoration owners to have a mediator such as yourself, is it can be the same thing for a restoration owner, right? Like, especially in a small town, they frustrate or burn a bridge with an adjuster for one job. They could go, the next street over, there's another water loss, there's water damage in somebody's basement, and that same adjuster might have to be the one on that job, right? So it's like, if they burn that bridge, that's why, something as simple as just having a mediator that can help, vouch for the restoration contractor and make sure they're getting paid, and also make sure there's no bridges being burnt between them and the adjuster. Like you said, building those relationships and making sure nobody is hurt or offended or feel like they're getting, one-upped in a situation. Like, you want to make sure that everybody feels like it's fair and equitable on all sides. So
no doubt. And it doesn't always work out perfectly like that. Just as in every industry, some insurance adjusters are just mean, and they don't care. And there's nothing that you can do as a restoration contractor or, as a billing agency to help bridge any gaps. They're just going to be mean, and they're going to bring hatred into their job. And that's just what they do. But we work with those guys too, and we help try to make their day a little better. And there is the aspect of accountability too. It's not just about rolling over. Any relationship has to have give and take from both sides, as you know. And so there is that too. Accountability from both sides is extremely important from the carrier's aspect and the contractor's aspect. So it's a fine line sometimes. It's a fun dance to do.
Let's talk, Josh, if you don't mind, let's go a little bit further into that challenge that restoration owners have with, I think you've mentioned at it a little bit, and so have I, but this problem of cash flow. The majority of our audience is in the cleaning and restoration space, but for those that might not be, for those that are listening in that might not be, speak a little bit about that that problem and why it's such a unique problem to the restoration space as far as cash flow goes.
Oh, cash is king, Hayden.
Oh, it
And
is. For a small business owner, it is big time.
100%. I so many times I've seen, restoration companies try to start out and they just don't quite have the cash flow necessary to pay their referral partners, and to bring those leads coming in, or they might strike up a relationship with a referral partner, but for whatever reason, cash flow is hung up and it's delayed, and they're not able to get those partnerships taken care of financially. And those partnerships will dry up very quick, and they'll go to the next restoration company that can't afford to pay them what their rates are on that kind of stuff. And so that number one is very important, is to be able to have the freed up cash flow in order to keep your referral partners happy and current. That's huge. Without that, your lead sources dry up, and then everything else kind of goes away. Not to mention everything else, like your internal, overhead of paying employees and keeping the lights on, all that kind of stuff. So without cash flow, or extremely delayed cash flow, and that gets tough. That gets tough. And the problem with that is, when you're short on that cash and your cash flow is kind of dwindling, a lot of these contractors focus on, okay, well, I got to go get more jobs. I got to go get more work, focus on that kind of things and those types of things. And then they kind of tend to let the actual accounts receivable process have the attention it needs in order to increase that cash flow. One of the things that being able to outsource that accounts receivable department really helps that process out with is, we're always here. We're not on the roof. We're not under, a crawl space. We're not in a containment barrier where we can't answer the phone. We're always here. And when that adjuster picks up the phone and decides, hey, now's the time, I'm going to call on this claim and I want to get it done.
I'm figuring this out right now. Yeah.
You want to answer that phone because they're hot to trot, and you want to make sure that they're ready to go. And if they have to leave a message and you have to return that phone call, whether it's later today or tomorrow or the next, now that adjuster has moved on to something else. And so it's really important to be able to be available to be able to take those calls. And that's one of the things that we provide that way is, we're not the ones called out on these emergency losses at 2 a.m. to have to go and take that. We're sitting here at our desks and we're working on this for our contractors. So being able to speed up that cash flow, be available, and really shorten that lag time between project completion and being paid for those services, absolutely essential. The longer that drags, the more trials and the more issues come up for a resto contractor, and to be able to shorten that out is a huge advantage over your competitor.
Yeah.
Sure.
I wish I had the data on me, and I'm gonna be mad that I don't, but it's been, I think, a couple of months, maybe just 2 months. CNR, in partnership with another company, did this state of the industry report, and they pulled all this data. I'm sure you're aware of this, Josh, but they grabbed all this data from several hundred restoration contractors. And one of the questions that they asked was, how long does it take you to get paid on average? And I don't have the exact data, so I hope I'm not misquoting, but I would say the majority of the people that were, the contractors that were polled for this question, the majority were 60 plus days until they're getting paid for a job, which is so painful. Like for people out there that own a small business, or maybe I don't own a small business, but I can't imagine if I did a job on day one and didn't get a check for that job until day 60, and I've got to pay employees and keep the lights on and pay my rent and pay my truck payments or whatever. Like I can't imagine how stressful that's got to be. So anything that can decrease that time, even if it's something as simple as just being available, right? Like one of the keys that you mentioned there was, hey, we're just available. We're something as simple as just being able to answer the phone call and get back to that just adjuster ASAP can, even if it just helps a couple of days, all of that, those things add up, right? Answering that phone call can shrink your time by a couple of days. Having the right documentation can shrink it by a couple of days. Like having all of those pieces in place, which I'm sure you guys help manage all of that, like can turn 60 days maybe into 50, and then maybe into 45, and then maybe into 40, right? Like it just can slowly shrink those times so that you don't have to be waiting as long. I think you're always going to be waiting as a restoration contractor. There's always going to be some lag time, but if we can make that if we can make it the least amount of pain as possible, cause the least amount of pain as possible, I think it's going to be a win for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what we see too, Hayden, is around that 60 plus day mark
Yeah.
for your average turnaround time for collection. These guys are contractors and not banks. To sit there and hold that money and front that money for that long can be crippling.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of money for a lot of these contractors. So being able to reduce that is absolutely imperative, for any sort of healthy business.
Yeah.
Shorten down that accounts receivable turnaround time as much as you can. And there's lots of different ways you can do that. A lot of states have, prompt pay statutes that you just need to remind the adjuster about, hey, you're coming up on that time,
Yeah.
and being able to kind of be that thorn in their side a little bit, or at least that reminder for them. Hey, look, I know you're busy. Things are crazy in the world right now. You're coming up on this timeline. Anything we can do to help you, give us a quick update on what's going on, that kind of stuff, just those touch points. And there's a lot of things that we do like that can really help that process along. But yeah, that's a killer, man. You get into that 60 plus day turnaround time and that hurts.
Oh, it hurts big time. And, yeah, without harping too much on it, and I don't want to cause PTSD for any restoration contractors that might be listening in, but Derek, my boss who used to own a restoration company, told this story the other day about, being a restoration owner, and it was the peak of the size of his business and having to make a very large payroll the next morning. And that night of being like, I don't know how I'm going to make payroll tomorrow morning because I've been waiting to get paid on jobs for months. And he says it's the scariest, most stressful time. And he's like, having some way to just speed that up again, without harping on it too much, but having any way to just speed that up and get rid of some of those headaches for a business owner is just, I think should be at the top priority of anybody's list. So,
yeah. I mean, most people don't enjoy talking to insurance adjusters. It's not
yeah,
not at the top of their fun to-do list. And so a lot of times that gets pushed down to the bottom. Well, that is our to-do list.
yeah,
So
that's what you guys are
that's
doing.
what we're here to do. We take that headache off of these contractors, and all of our contractors are all too happy to never pick up the phone and talk to an adjuster again. Just know that we're doing it better than they did anyways, and they don't have that headache, and you talk about turnaround time. Not that I want this to be a sales pitch or anything like that, but being able to get those invoices paid quicker, like we said, is absolutely essential. And right now, our typical turnaround time is about we're averaging about 32 days right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is super fast compared to the
it's cutting it in half. It's cutting
average.
it in half, really, right? If you think about it that way, you're cutting their time in half.
Yeah, and some might drag on a little bit longer than that. That's why it's called an average. But those are the adjusters that are just mean, and they're going to do it just to put pressure on these non-program vendors. Is what we typically see going on there. But it's the struggle is real when it comes to accounts receivable for these resto companies. Man, they You know, one of the things too, Hayden, is when I first kind of got into the industry, um, there's a lot of like animosity towards insurance companies,
Yeah.
um, and almost saw them as the enemy, where it's
Right.
like, man, if you just pay the bill reasonably, none of this would have to happen. But the more that I've learned about the industry, um, and the more educated I've become, uh, the insurance companies are not restoration contractors' enemy. It's an interesting dynamic, no doubt. And by nature, that relationship is adversarial, right? Contractors want money, insurance companies don't want to pay money. But when you stop viewing insurance companies as the enemy, but really look for ways to work better with them and help these adjusters do their job, because the good adjusters are looking for ways to be able to justify and support the charges on the invoice. If they can't justify it or support it, they're not going to pay those line items. But as
Right.
long as they can document their file and say, hey, look, this is why, supervisor, I paid this specific line item on this invoice, the supervisor is going to have to support that and say, okay, well, you documented your file. There's a reason for it. Those are the good adjusters,
Yeah.
right? And those are the ones we love working with. And for the most part, adjusters are people too, and they're just trying to do their job.
100%.
And,
Yep.
that's one thing that we like to do is we keep very tedious notes on every adjuster we ever come in contact with. Every claim we've ever worked on, we keep tedious notes on those. So when we get an adjuster assigned, chances are very good we've already worked with that adjuster in the past, and we know what their hot buttons are and what to stay away from, and kind of how to work with those adjusters. That's another way that we're able to streamline that turnaround process, right? As we build those relationships too. Um, and our contractors are able to benefit across the board from those types of relationships. And really, that's one thing I really try to help our contractors understand is, hey, look, you do your job, we can help you make sure your documentation is in order and that you've
Yep.
got everything there that you need to completely support and justify your invoice. If it's that way, once we get that, then we can turn around and we can do our job, because we're helping the adjuster do their job. And that's just going to get you paid faster and get you paid more.
Yep.
And it's just really trying to smooth out that process, I guess, so to
Yep.
say.
Totally.
Just make it easier to, less of a, bashing your head against the wall constantly. And we get to take a lot of that emotion out of it.
Right. No, I
So,
love that. And I think, yeah, like you said, I think a crucial piece of the process for you guys, which is probably what you spend most of your time going back to the contractor for, not the adjuster, but is that documentation. I think making sure contractors are really organized and have all the documentation necessary so that, yeah, it makes your job easier, and it makes in the long run, it's going to make their job easier because they're going to get
100%,
paid quicker, right? It's just something as
100%.
simple as tracking what's going on.
Yep.
Um, are there any, I guess, tricks to the trade of doing that? I want to talk more about relationships and some other things, but this is, I think, a crucial piece, something like documentation. Are there tricks that you use, softwares, programs out there that you're like, yep, this is what we tell our contractors to use in order to document their process?
As far as software goes or specific pieces of documentation, there's not one that's best, right?
Right.
It's just use what you're using, but use it correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Use
have
it.
these tools, use them. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like Exactimate. Exactimate I think it tends to be the scapegoat a lot in the industry, but I'm a huge fan of Exactimate. I think it's a fantastic tool,
Yeah.
so long as it's used correctly,
Yes.
and when that contractor is using Exactimate correctly, it's really speaking the same language as the adjuster knows to speak. And
Yep.
so that can facilitate that. But every resto company is going to be quick to tell you, well, no two jobs are the same. So I can't give you an estimate. I can't give you an accurate, upfront price. And that's very true. But the first part of that statement was no two jobs are the same. So help us understand, or help the adjuster understand, why this job was different. What was it about this job? Was there, once you brought up that first layer of flooring, you actually found 2 more layers of flooring underneath there. And that's why
Right.
you had extra labor hours on the invoice. A lot of contractors will just throw that in there and say, yeah, we've got an extra 39 hours worth of labor on this thing too. But no notes, no explanation
Yeah,
for
no
that. And you have
explanation
to
why.
go and I'm not going to just willy-nilly pay 39 extra hours here, guys.
Yeah.
So it's just simple stuff, if you have, an 8 to, 9, 10, whatever day dry out period, little out of the norm, but explain why. Was there, did your equipment get shut off? Did a door get left open? What was it? Were you not able to hit certain temperatures because windows kept getting open? I don't know. But just explain and document, hey, we were there, we were taking our moisture readings, but it still took the 8 to 10 days, and this is why. Just explain it.
Yeah.
That's what most of these carriers are looking for. Help explain your invoice. If I can understand your invoice and why it's, $6,000 instead of $3,000, well, at least I understand it and I can support that. Again, not every adjuster is like that. There's some out there that don't care, and it's their
Right.
life goal and mission to pay as little as possible, no matter how well the job is documented. And we have processes for those people too.
There you go. There you go. You've got it all. You've got all the processes figured out. And
That's right.
like you said, because you oftentimes work with the same adjuster multiple times, you can kind of have files on and be like, oh, hey, we know this adjuster. Yeah, their hot buttons are they really like this kind of documentation, or hey, they really like these type of notes, right? So like as long as you know that, then you can tell your contractor, hey, make sure you've got this X, Y, and Z, because I know this adjuster is going to ask for that at some point.
That's
So
right.
having like a mediator that's got these notes that can say, hey, we've worked with this adjuster 3 times previous to this. I know they're going to want all of these
Right.
things.
Right. And
Having
and our contractors, they really don't mind getting us that information and answering those questions for us. But if the adjuster is the one asking those questions, they take that message a little differently. They interpret that a little bit differently.
Yep. Yep. Well, I don't want to, without, for the sake of not backtracking too far, I want to talk a little bit more in depth about relationships. It's relationships and building relationships within the industry, within any industry, is a topic that we've talked about multiple times on this podcast. But I think you come from a very unique background, both in your career previous to One Claim Solution and now what you do on a day to day basis. Um, what has been a key for you in order to build positive relationships throughout your career? Do you feel like yeah, I don't know if you can distill it down to one thing, but when you're going in to meet maybe a new person, how do you build a relationship with that person?
Man, first and foremost, it's got to come down to trust.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to build that trust factor in the relationship first and foremost. Without that trust, they're not going to listen to you because, quite frankly, whatever you say doesn't really hold any water.
Yeah.
And so being able to build a relationship with them, and that can be difficult sometimes, in a very small amount of time, whether it's these resto companies coming in and they see a plumber or a property management company at the gas station. You have a very small window in order to build a relationship there. How do you do that? Right. Um, and and honestly, I find that the best way to do that is to just be genuine in your
Yeah.
approach with people.
Yeah.
If you're fake and you come across overly cheerful or overly whatever, people see through that. Just be your genuine self with them, and show that you actually do care. Even though you just met that person, it's you can find ways to kind of express that level of care, and that you can be trusted there in that way. Of course, that then gets built on over a period of time. It's hard to just trust anybody these days, as you know, but I would say trust. That's the first step, and the most important thing in any relationship is to be able to build that trust as
Yep.
quickly as possible. And whether that's building on different common beliefs or whatever it might be. There's different ways to do that, but it's the biggest step, I think, in it all.
Well, and you're 100% right on the genuine thing. People know if you're genuine or not, right? Like people know if you actually care about being friends with them or you care about what's going on in their life. So like genuinely care. Decide you're going to be genuine with this person. And, I've often thought that, like, I think the golden rule is forgotten about in today's day and age a lot of times, that, like, treat people how you would want to be treated. So, um, think of what it would be like for someone to walk into I always, again, go
Absolutely.
back to the example of, like, a restoration owner trying to build relationships in order to get referrals, right? Think of what it would be like for someone to walk into your office and just strike up a conversation, right? Like, treat that person how you would want to be treated in that
Yep.
situation. Whether it's, if you're coming in to bring a plate of cookies, or you're coming in to take them out to lunch, or you're do something like that. Come from a genuine place in order to build that relationship, because people are going to see right through you. If all you care
100%.
about is getting that referral from that person, or all you care about is how is this person going to make me more money, people are
Yep.
going to see through it at some
Yep.
point.
Well, that reminds me, real quick of something that happened again this morning, different situation. There's a situation where a homeowner ended up canceling their claim with their carrier because the amount they didn't think the loss was big enough, so they canceled the claim. But when they got the invoice from the water mitigation company, they freaked out
Yeah.
and they were really mad, like mad. And they call in and they're making all sorts of threats, and so I end up jumping on the phone call, and in, man, 5 minutes, the guy's total demeanor completely changed over the phone. And it was because I took a minute to express, hey, I get it. You got the sticker shot going on. You're dealing with all this other stuff. It's super frustrating. You're feeling like you're being taken advantage of. Have you had a chance to go over the invoice yet? Do you have a second to go over it with me? I'll explain each charge on here and why it's there. And it was a 15-minute phone call, and we ended up settling for probably, I'd say, 6 or 7 times the amount that he had originally called in. And he's like, "This is all I'm going to pay, and you better take it or leave it."
Yeah.
But once he was able to see that and understand, like, okay, this guy took the time to explain to me what was going on, and he clearly showed, empathy towards what I was going through. He didn't feel like he was getting raked over the coals, and he, contractor was happy because they got a fair deal, and he was happy because, he now understood it.
Right.
So it felt
Right.
like someone actually just listened to what he had to say,
Yep.
you
And that's
know?
all it took. And that's
That's
all it
all it
took in that
took.
situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome, man. That
So
seriously, something as simple as that. And I think it relates to any industry that you're in. I think it relates to, regardless of, if you're a small business owner, no matter what you're doing, at some point you're going to try and build relationships, right? Whether you're selling a product, you're selling tennis shoes, or selling a service, right? Like, at some point you're going to want to build relationships with your customers. And if you do it from a genuine place and genuinely care about who they are and what they're going through and what they're experiencing, you're first and foremost, that you're probably going to get more customers, or you're going to make more money. But at the end of the day, you're going to have people care about you and your business if you're
that's right.
if you're just genuine about it. Like,
Yeah.
people are going to come back and use you again, or people are going to give you a positive review.
That's right.
Um,
Right there.
yeah.
Right. That guy this morning, he was hot to trot, and he was going to post all sorts of negative reviews about this contractor.
Yep.
And at the end of it, he's like, "Man, I'm going to go ahead and refer this guy out to other people. This is great. I'm so glad
Yeah.
that you guys, this is wonderful."
Yeah.
So totally took that whole thing and shifted it. Why? Because he felt like he was cared about, and that someone actually just cared enough to listen.
Yep. Just cared enough to
So
listen. I love it.
kind
Oh,
of
it's so
cool.
great. Well, Josh, before I let you go, I don't want to keep you too much longer. Talk a little bit about what the future looks like. One Claim Solution. What are you guys? What are, I don't know if you have any goals for 2023, or what the future is looking like for your business, but what are you hoping the future holds for One Claim Solution?
Man, Hayden, that's a very
A
timely
loaded question, a
question.
little bit.
You know, um, up until the end of last year, One Claim is just kind of all of its growth has come from its customers, right? Word
Right.
of mouth. It's people referring us to other people. We haven't actively marketed what we do, um, and we just finally started marketing it after 7 years. And the response has been amazing, very exciting, and very encouraging. And so the future's bright, not just for OCS, but the industry. You know, we participated in the RIA event last week in LA with Ed Cross and Mike Fulton, the president and CEO of Xactimate, was there. There's a lot happening to be excited about in the industry right now. There's a lot of people out there advocating for restoration contractors. And I really think that everyone playing together and working in that regard is going to get a lot of traction and is going to help these contractors really realize a different level of success than they have. And I think that once these contractors figure out, okay, it's not all about adversity all the time, you know, I'm excited about that aspect of the industry, and I'm excited for OCS's involvement in that. I think that you know, being able to bring accountability again to both sides of the equation is going to be huge. And that's what we're really trying to do, is bring that accountability, not just to the carriers, but also to our contractors, and make sure that things are working there. If you have one more quick time for one more quick story, Hayden.
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
Again, relationships, right? I've got a relationship with an insurance company's attorney here in Arizona. We've been able to build a really good relationship, and a family member of hers that was elderly had a loss in her house. And this attorney contacted me directly and said, Josh, this just happened to my loved one. I don't want to use my insurance company's contractors that they recommend. Who do you recommend that I use for this person? And it was interesting to see. And it was, okay, yeah, for this situation, I would probably, you know, and I gave a recommendation out, and it worked out very well for her. But those are the types of relationships that will go far beyond, you know, anything else that we can really do, is being able to have that reputation and with our relationships. And so I think that's important, and it's a good story to kind of learn from.
Love it. Oh, that's so cool. Thank you, Josh. There's been some awesome information today. And I know, our clients are going to get a lot of, or our listeners rather are going to get a lot of really good value out of this. This has been really fun for me. It's been fun to pick your brain a little bit and get to know you a little bit better.
I love it.
I want to close with the same 3 questions we ask all of our guests. Kind of rapid fire, but I probably should have given you a little bit more warning than I did, but it's going to be off the cuff, and I love it. So we're gonna jump right in. First question: favorite book or podcast that you're reading or listening to right now, or maybe that you've read, you know, recently. It doesn't have to necessarily be right now, but something that you really love.
Favorite book, without question, A River Runs Through It by Norman MacLean. A lot of
that's
tidbits
awesome
in there about you know, life and the way to treat people. But not the answer I was planning on giving you. The answer I was planning on giving you, one of my favorite books, is Delay, Deny, Defend in the industry. It's a great book, and that's one of the books that really helped me understand the role that insurance plays in all of this, and how we can better work with them. That book will do different things for different people. That's what I got out of it, was how to work better with them instead of against them.
Oh, that's great.
So that's one I'll constantly go back to and look up new things too in that book and reread. So
that's great. We get a lot of recommendations. I think this will be episode 52, maybe 51, 52. And that's the first time I've heard that book. So that's awesome. We've had a lot of repeat books. A lot of people like the same, so that's great. That's a great recommendation. Second question: if you could rewind, or sorry, no, that's the last one. How do you relax at the end of a long day? I know you wear a lot of hats with one claim solution and in what you're trying to do and grow the business, but yeah, how do you relax, recharge your batteries at the end of a long day?
That's a really good question, and one I'm still trying to learn how to do. You know, my wife hates it, but she understands it. Is, you know, my phone's never turned off. I get calls from my clients at any hour of the day, and that's okay. She understands I'm passionate about helping the contractors out in this industry, but For me, I'm super involved in my kids' lives, whether it's their different sporting events or whatever else they might have going on. I coach my kids' baseball teams. And so that's definitely one of the best ways that I relax, or maybe taking a walk with the wife, or fishing or hunting or anything like that.
No, I love it. Well, you mentioned a river runs through it, and I immediately was like, Josh likes fly fishing. I'm in. I'm all about it. That's great. Last question. That was, I messed up and accidentally got him confused. But last question, if you could rewind to the beginning of your career and tell yourself one thing, tell younger Josh one thing, what would it be?
Don't get so upset when things don't work out exactly how you want it to. That would be the number one thing. So many times that I look back and I remember being so angry that something happened that was different than what was promised to me, or different than I expected. And just remember being so angry and bitter about it, but being able to look back on it through a different lens, several years into the future, you're able to see, okay, these are the things I learned from that experience. And I wish I would have focused more on learning from that trial than being so bitter about that trial. And I think that had I wasted less time being bitter anytime anything didn't go my way, I think that my career probably would have, and my skill level probably would have been light years ahead of where it's at right now.
Oh, I love that. You're a man after my own heart, Josh. That's 100. I 100% do that as well. And that's some of my biggest regrets in life are like, gosh, I wish I wouldn't have got so hot about something so minuscule or so dumb. At the time it felt like it was the end of the world, but you looking back, you're just like, dude, that was no big deal, man. Don't, and I that's 100%. And I think that's great advice. I love it.
My mom used to tell me, hey, picture this problem in 10 years. If it matters in 10 years, then let's think a little bit more about it. If it doesn't matter in 10 years, then quit thinking about it. Move on. That was a piece of advice from my mother that I cherish.
That's a great rule of thumb. That's a great mom right there. I love it. Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been super fun for me. Again, it's been good to pick your brain, learn about who you are, and learn about what you guys are doing at One Claim. And I think it's going to help our listeners, both, those that are in the restoration industry, but as far as just building relationships in general, I think a lot of our listeners are going to get some great value out of this. So again, thank you so much for coming on, and hope to have you on again.
Yeah, absolutely, Hayden. I really appreciated it and enjoyed our conversation, and can't wait for the next one, my friend.
Love it. We'll talk to you later, Josh.
All right. Thank you.
This has been Success Elevated, making you a little bit better one show at a time. Thanks for joining us. Please subscribe on YouTube or any other major podcast platform to listen to more episodes. We are proudly brought to you by Spot On Solutions. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help you grow your business, please check us out at spotonsolutions.com.